there it goes.
What's going on, guys? Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com bringing you a video today to once and for all prove which boots are the fastest, or if any boot will actually make you faster at all. If you guys do end up enjoying the video, don't forget to support it with a like. And if you're new here watching for the first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. Now, this is a test that I've wanted to make for years now. Basically, since I first started this YouTube channel, I've just never made it because it's a test that's kind of difficult to run based on all the variables, which we'll get into in just a second. Now, I feel like over the years, these companies have done a pretty good job of not necessarily saying it directly, but definitely implying that speed boots will definitely make you faster. And while not everybody believes that's true, including myself, there are plenty of people who have been completely brainwashed and seem to think that if they're not wearing the latest Nike Mercurials, they're going to be significantly slower. So in this test, we're gonna find out whether or not that's actually true. So for this test, I picked out 6 different boots that would all be tested at the same field, at the same time, on the same day, all being worn by the same person, that person being me. The 6 boots that I selected were the Nike Mercurial Vapor 12 Elite, the X17 Plus Pure Speed from Adidas, the Puma Future 18.1, the Adidas Nemesis 17 Plus 360 Agility, the Adidas Copa Mundial, and an AG Pro variation of the Nike Tiempo Legend 7. All 6 of those boots tested exactly in that order. So the first time I tried to record this test, it didn't work out so well. You saw it at the start of the video. I ended up pulling my hamstring pretty early on, which set this back about an entire month. So this time around, I warmed up properly and finished this test all in one session on the same day, which I think needed to happen in order for the results of this test to actually be accurate. So in order to test the speed of all these different boots, I wanted to have as controlled a setting as possible. So all these tests were performed on the same day on an indoor artificial grass playing surface. The temperature stayed the same. All 6 boots were tested in about a span of about an hour and a half. So I did 6 total sprints over an hour and a half, giving myself plenty of rest in between, just so I felt like I wasn't fatigued going into each individual shoe, because obviously I'd be more fresh on the first sprint versus the 6th sprint, but I spaced it out long enough to where I feel like fatigue wasn't a huge factor. Of course, I had to determine how far I was going to run. The first time I did this, I kind of measured out 40 yards just by stepping, but I came to the conclusion that that wasn't overly accurate, and there was no defined finish line when I did that. So I figured the best way to do this was to run directly across the 18-yard box, where I'd have a line on one side and a finish line on the other. For those that don't know, the width of an 18-yard box is approximately 44 yards, the equivalent of about 40.23 meters. So from the start line, it's 18 yards to the first goal post, 8 yards to the second goal post, and then from that second goal post, another 18 yards, equaling out to 44 yards. I also felt like this was a really good way to test it in that you could go to the field yourself, test this out, and really have a good idea of how far exactly I was running. It's also important to note that I called my own start for each of these sprints, which you guys will hear in the video, and then I ended the timer as soon as my chest crossed the line, kind of like a 100-meter dash. Also, as much as there is a human element to actually sprinting and maintaining consistent times over 6 individual sprints wearing different boots, there's also a human element to actually timing these runs. I did my best to be as accurate as possible in the editing, which you guys will see, but I'm sure if you time this with your phone from when I start to when I finish, everyone's gonna end up with different times every single time on the same run, just because, again, there is a human element to it. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this test. I think it's accurate enough to where we are gonna draw a pretty good conclusion on which boot's the fastest and which boot is the slowest, and reasons why that's the case. With that said, here are the results.
Mark, get set, go.
So we'll start with the boot that I was slowest in, the AG Pro Nike Tiempo Legend 7 Elite. And the reason why I picked these was because of the AG Pro stud pattern. Everything else that I tested had either a firm ground stud pattern or an FG AG stud pattern. And of course, this test was performed on artificial grass, which this stud pattern is specifically made for. Of course, it was the boot that I ran the slowest in, but it's also important to note that this was the final sprint that I did of the 6 in total. So was fatigue a factor? Definitely a possibility. I can tell you that I didn't feel slower in this shoe versus any of the other ones, but as you can see by the final results, I was in fact the slowest. My second slowest time came in the Adidas Nemesis 17 Plus 360 Agility, which I picked for testing because of the laceless design. It's the only laceless boot that I tested with its FG-AG stud pattern and its weight of about 7.2 ounces, making it the second lightest boot that I tested out. My final time ended up being 5.62 seconds, and this was the 4th boot that I tested. So was fatigue a factor in regards to slowing down? Possibly, but I did end up running a faster time in the next boot that I tested, so I wouldn't say that fatigue was a major factor. Again, as far as overall the sensation of speed that I experience in the shoe, the traction is pretty good on artificial grass. Does the laceless system offer the most locked-in sensation? No, not necessarily, but I didn't at the same time feel like it was slowing me down over the course of my sprint, but it did end up being the second slowest. Third slowest was the Puma Future 18.1 Net Fit, which I picked because I wanted a speed boot offering from the Puma brand, part of the big three, of course. This is not marketed truly as a speed boot, but it's relatively light at 7.3, 7.4 ounces, the lightest on offer from the brand right now, plus it has an FG-AG stud pattern. Being that we are in artificial grass, I wanted to see if that would make any significant difference. The final time ended up being 5.6 seconds, which was just 0.02 seconds quicker than the Nemesis 17 Plus. Basically no difference whatsoever. The two shoes are very similar in regards to weight. Yes, they fit and feel very different, and they have very different stud patterns as well, but the final time ended up being almost exactly the same. This is where things get a little bit interesting. The third fastest time that I ran was in the Adidas Copa Mundial, which is a shoe that I picked for a couple different reasons, mainly because I was kind of expecting this to be the slowest. It's a leather shoe with a much wider, sloppier fit than everything else that I tested. It doesn't have a very aggressive stud pattern at all, the least aggressive of everything I tested, and the weight is far more significant. These are 3 ounces heavier than everything else in this video, weighing in at 10.35 ounces with the trim tongue that I have as a modification. So shave about 0.2 ounces from a regular pair of Copas. I don't think that 0.2 ounces had anything to do with it. Anyways, the final time that I ended up recording was 5.55 seconds. So not drastically faster than the Puma Future or the Nemesis 17 Plus, but faster nonetheless. Also worth noting, this was the 5th run that I recorded, meaning that it was the second to last sprint that I did, where you would think fatigue would be setting in. But obviously I ran just as fast, if not faster than most modern boots in the Copa Mundial, which I don't think most people would expect. Which brings us to the second fastest boot that I tested, the Nike Mercurial Vapor 12 Elite, which needed to be in this test for obvious reasons. The Mercurial line is the most popular speed boot line on the market, and really, I think you can credit Nike for the whole speed boot concept in the first place. The Vapor 12 Elite is a very good shoe, super tight fit, very responsive, super locked in sensation as well. Full fly knit upper. I picked the Vapor instead of the Superfly simply because the lack of collar makes these a little bit lighter. 6.3 ounces in a size 9.5 US, making these the lightest boot that I tested by almost a full ounce. Plus, it's the firm ground Mercurial stud pattern, which I strongly feel is the most aggressive traction that you can get from any FG stud pattern on the market right now. So to say the least, I had high expectations. If any boot was going to make me faster, it would be this one. And as you can see, I did end up being faster than most of the other boots that I tested out, with a final time of 5.48 seconds on my very first run. This is the first one that I tested. No do-overs, no practice runs whatsoever. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I did feel most stiff on my first run when I did test these out. So it's entirely possible that had I run a second time, my time would have been a little bit faster. But one chance, that was the point of this test in the first place. It didn't feel like a particularly fast run, but Even if it didn't feel fast, you can see by the final time, the footage is not lying, that this was the second fastest boot that I tested out, which is interesting because this is one of 2 speed boots that I tested in this video, and the 2 speed boots did end up being the fastest. Which brings us to the winner of this test, the Adidas X17 Plus Pure Speed, the flagship speed boot from the Adidas brand right now. FGAG stud pattern, lightweight sprint frame construction, and a size 9 US. These are about 7.4 ounces, so similar in weight to the other boots in this video, despite being a flagship speed boot. And honestly, I'm a big fan of this shoe in general. This is my personal favorite on offer from the Adidas brand right now. Now, it's worth noting that my final time of 5.35 seconds, which was the fastest, was done on my second run, which the first run, like I talked about, I felt kind of stiff. The second run, I felt really good, really warm, and was probably the freshest run that I had out of the entire test. So it doesn't surprise me all that much that this ended up being my fastest time, but it was significantly faster than the bottom 3 at about 0.3 seconds quicker, 0.2 seconds, which isn't a lot of time, obviously, but I think it's significant enough to where you could make an argument that a speed boot like an X17 Plus Pure Speed is going to be quicker than a non-speed boot, but we'll talk about that more in just a second. Either way you want to look at it, this was the fastest through the testing. So in conclusion, I have to admit that I was expecting the results to be a little bit different. Personally, I was of the opinion that my times would be very similar across the board, and the ones that ended up being faster and the ones that ended up being slower were going to be down mostly to human error, which is a flaw in this test, I will admit. But since we're all humans wearing these boots, everyone is going to be subjected to human error. So in that regard, I think that the results of this test are somewhat accurate, because fatigue is going to be a part and human error is always going to be a factor in any kind of sports, especially when you're trying to run as quickly as possible. As far as which boots ended up being the fastest and which ended up being the slowest, it's worth noting that the time split from the fastest time to the slowest time was only about 0.35 seconds, which is really not all that much. When you're talking about stride lengths in a sprint, at the Olympic level, that's obviously a big distance. For the average person, non-professional athletes, which is pretty much going to be everybody watching this, is 0.35 seconds super significant? No, I think you can chalk that down to human error. But what I was not expecting was for the 2 fastest times out of the 6 to be with actual speed boots on my feet. So can I 100% say that speed boots won't make you that little bit faster? The simple answer to that question is no, because I tested it myself and I was technically faster in the speed boots. With that said, it is worth noting that I ran my 3rd fastest time in the old school Copa Mundial, faster than the Puma Future 18.1, faster than the Nemesis 17 Plus laceless boot, and faster than the AG Pro Tiempo Legend 7. And of course, the Copa Mundial is a sloppier fit, a heavier boot with less aggressive traction than all the shoes that were slower. So is there all that much truth to specific shoes making you faster? In the case of speed boots, really difficult to say. In the case of everything across the board in general, my personal opinion, even though we tested speed boots as being faster, is still that there is no shoe that you can buy that is light enough or offers any kind of special traction pattern that's going to make you legitimately faster to where you will have an actual advantage versus other people not wearing the same shoes, because ultimately that is what performance comes down to. If I can put on a pair of shoes and it will legitimately make me faster or give me an advantage that someone else without that equipment won't have, then by all means it's totally worth it. But if you're banking on buying the latest speed boots, hoping that they're actually going to make you faster, in my opinion, if you're fast, you're fast. If you're slow, you're slow. No boots that you put on your feet are going to make you legitimately faster. And that's pretty much it for this test, guys. I don't normally ask you to do this kind of thing, but share this video with a friend who perhaps is brainwashed by these brands that speed boots or a particular shoe is gonna make them faster or slower. Because I think if anything, this video kind of proved that no boot is going to make you faster or slower. I think the human element is really what counts here. But if you have any questions at all, leave them down below in the comments. I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. And if you have any comments of your own based on your own experience with heavier and lighter boots, different stud patterns, stuff like that, in regards to how it affects your speed, let me know down below in the comments. I'll be curious to see everything you guys have to say. If you're not subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear, here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to support it with a like. All my social media information linked down below in the description as well, so go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.